All right, so this is when we're going to talk about what we're supposed to.
Okay. All right, we got
So mental health. Let me tell you how this came up. Well, it's really not even important how this came up. So you're well aware of how many people, everybody is dealing with their mental health in one capacity or another, right?
Sure.
So my hope is, one, we can just bring it up in the context of the church, because it doesn't always come up. Yep. We don't talk about it, as you know. And then, hopefully we can even offer some tools. I say we, you, and if I can somehow piggyback and seem as if I'm contributing to this conversation, that would be great. If we just, some helpful ideas like, okay, just self-care type stuff and everything. So where do we start?
And I would say by intuition, you know far more than you give yourself credit for. This has always been my experience with people in ministry, people who have attempted to come alongside and support people through their own personal crisis. I think about like my parents were involved in ministry in churches over the years. My father-in-law has spent a lot of time counseling members of the church. None of them have any training in mental health.
Right.
But when I talk to them about counseling and the things that they generate as support and advice, and the way that they try to help people, it's always spot on. It's always like their intuition is intuition mixed with a heck of a lot of life experience and practice caring about people. That's going to take you 90% of the way, and then what does additional training or research offer? It's really just more specificity
and those skills.
Right, how to kind of guide someone through a process, or maybe have a little bit more effect on the trajectory of somebody making change in their life, or getting through a difficult season. And
for me, I think any skills that I have mostly come about because of my own wrestling with mental health, which started really, really young. I say really, really young. I was probably, I always kind of pegged myself as being in about 5th grade when I started having panic attacks, like intense panic attacks, not just I'm scared, don't turn the lights out.
Something that would qualify as like a clinical panic attack.
And that lasted, it has lasted until today. But there was seasons where that kind of went away, and then it came back in high school. And actually, last time we were talking about college, you probably don't remember this, but there was a semester where I actually went home about a week early. Fortunately, it was the end of the semester, because I just started experiencing constant panic. And I actually went home, went to my doctor. I just went to a PCP, and for the first time ever was put on medicine, the typical anti-anxiety medicines. I can't even remember what they put me on, but I was on that for a season, and I've been on that a couple of times. There have been seasons where it's this is just a little more than I can manage. So medicine has been helpful at times for me, and then when I don't need it, I don't do it.
Well, first and foremost, I genuinely want to say to you, thank you for saying that. I wish more pastors and Christian leaders could have the courage to say something like that publicly. It's so important. And the fact that this started at an early age, that's just how it tends to go. This is so much more common than people realize. And within the church, the statistics are no different. It's the same as, unfortunately, things like divorce statistics. They're no better in the church than outside of the church. It's the same with mental health statistics. They're the same in whether you're polling a group of regular church attendees or folks that wouldn't be caught dead in a church. It's the same statistics. And
I almost wonder, if I would, and I've been a Christian for so long, it's kind of a moot point, but I almost feel like at times I could manage my anxiety better if I wasn't a Christian. Let me qualify that.
I think I know what you mean. It's more the culture, probably.
My Christian faith causes me, and desirably so, I'm not saying this is bad, causes me to think more often on deep things.
Okay. Yeah.
Serious things like eternity and creation, stuff like that.
Right.
That's where a lot of my anxiety seems to center on.
Yeah.
When my brain just kind of has these little meltdowns where I'm like, I can't process the infinite nature of so many of these things.
Yeah.
Whereas if I wasn't forcing myself all the time to think about God and think about eternity and all that, I think I would have less panic.
These are the profound mysteries of life and existence and what it means to be a human, to be a created being. It's something that can just be overwhelming, and within the context of the church, that's
it comes
the
up
topic
daily.
of discussion.
Yeah.
But the other thing that happens in churches, unfortunately, and I think this is really something that we need a culture shift within the churches big time, is that such a big lever that is pulled to try to get people saved or evangelize the message is fear and guilt. And it really it doesn't take much of a stretch of the imagination to figure out how that can be problematic to people's mental health, whereas it's something that's from a good place of a positive motivation, trying to help somebody see the light of Christ and all that. But it
and at times appropriate too. I mean, there is an appropriate level of those things.
Yes, but just has to be managed so much more wisely than sometimes it is.
And I think as a preacher, there's close to 200 people here on a regular Sunday. Everybody's in such a different place. So the tone of the message can will affect different people in different ways.
Absolutely.
So that's I can't even begin to figure out that puzzle.
And you won't be able to figure out that puzzle, but you won't be able to anticipate it either, because you just never know the context of somebody's history and how it is bearing on the present moment, the present content of what you're saying. We can kind of poke fun about trigger warnings, and then we're getting carried away with those types of things. But in reality, there's all kinds of things that could seem very, very benign to you or me, but are absolute, triggers for people's trauma and past experiences, and that can be happening.
Yes, I've stepped on those landmines in preaching, and then you get feedback, right?
Yes, right.
And it makes you aware. Of going forward of those types of situations. Kind of learn as you go.
And good for you to have that perspective of, okay, this is something I need to learn as I go, because the instinct, in a lot of times, is to just rise up on the defensive.
Sure,
It feels like, hey, I'm being critiqued or I'm being attacked here. But to be able to understand, okay, this is a sensitive area. Help me understand it more, or maybe there's something I can take away from this. And
and again, there's a balance, because you can't be afraid to bring up important things, because it's somebody, one of the things I'm always even just bringing it up on the podcast makes me think of this, but abortion, we need to talk about abortion. It's a relevant cultural topic that the church needs to be engaged in. But anytime you bring it up, there are women who have had abortions, which is an emotionally traumatic event, and you don't know how they've processed that, and you don't know how they're going to respond to that. So just as an example, there's a lot of things like that.
The gross thing that happens in our, the landscape of our politics and even just our culture these days is that everything gets so simplified with a label, and that label often serves to dismiss whole groups of people's experiences. And that's a great example where this is, I don't care what venue, that's an incredibly controversial topic. And, but being able to understand, oh my gosh, what could be more complex and intimate for somebody to walk through such a, crisis kind of experience, and the challenges involved in that, sometimes the anguish that can be involved.
That's a big deal. So what are kind of, do you want to talk about COVID?
Yeah.
Don't you need to give some sort of disclaimer too?
Oh, absolutely. Good
I want to
point.
give you
Thank
the
you for bringing
opportunity
that. So one of the things to note, I'm a psychologist. I work for the VA, healthcare system. And it's something that I have to do is I have to say very clearly that anything that I talk about publicly, like in a podcast like this, does not represent any views or opinions held by the VA.
Yeah.
This is just strictly my opinion, my views that I'm representing here today. So I appreciate you.
It might be good for me to do that for the church and just say, anything I say here doesn't represent the church.
I'm not sure it works like that, but it brings up a good point, something I wanted to talk to you about. Maybe this isn't the right segue, but like just thinking about how important it is to have healthy boundaries in place in your life, in relationships, work-life balance, things like that, taking care of yourself. And pastors historically have pretty porous or like very poor boundaries.
Yeah.
When does your job actually stop? When do you go, when do you say, I'm off? Like the rest of us go home from work at the end of the day and now we're, completely just our private selves.
Right. And your clients don't have your cell phone number, I assume. Right.
No, they do not. No.
Yeah.
And I work in an outpatient clinic, so they can call my office, but our clinic closes at 4:30.
Yeah.
So they have to be very clear about how do you manage things if there's a crisis outside of office hours, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can try to set up a similar structure, but it's just not. It's not so easy to do in church ministry.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
Because there's like there's Facebook now, Messenger.
Yeah.
There's like just so many ways. I can't even think of a way that I could stop communication coming at me.
Yeah.
Other than I guess this is just on me to put my phone aside. But I use my phone for so many things that I use it for my relaxation as well. You know what I mean? Like I'm on there doing things, watching videos or something or whatever.
It probably does have an airplane mode though.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's just, and that's just. I didn't mean to be like, oh look, here's this is the easy answer.
Yeah,
there's no easy answer. Yeah. There's no easy answer. No, come on. It's a complicated thing, and that's why I'm glad to talk to you about it.
So what does so you're kind of getting at the things that erode our mental health or our capacity to manage things. We live in a culture where we're just constantly bombarded with negative messages. We're constantly and it's not just pastors, other people in their careers too are contacted. Their work doesn't stop too.
Right.
So like, what are the things that erode away at our capacity to manage life and our mental health that you see?
Yeah, I mean, there's a myriad of things. I mean, things that can cause stress, that can generate hardship. I mean, the list is as long as anything. A lot of you had mentioned, shouldn't we talk about COVID? I mean, that's kind of the easy like cultural example right now. It's not even a cultural example. It's like pandemic example. It's drastically changed our lives to some degree across the world.
Yes.
When has something like this happened before? I mean, it's hard to find a precedent in human history that's quite like this situation. And just the way that it kind of arrested our normal life and routines and way of being in our own culture just got kind of turned around for 2 years, 3 years. What is it now?
Yeah, we're into 2 years.
Yeah.
We're 2 full years. We're into the third year.
Yeah. And right now we're kind of like, I think we're right on the fringe of like that social distance or did they change it to like 3.5 feet or something? I'm not sure.
I'd be lying if I had any regard for that.
Yeah. But that's just an example of like, that has one thing that we can say, whether we regard concerns with COVID in whatever capacity or whatever opinions we have about it. One thing we can't deny is that it has contributed to kind of isolating us from each other more so than what we're used to, and it has really changed that, like, kind of our social landscape in a way. Even you just imagine the difference of, like, there was a time there where it didn't matter where you were. You're walking into the store, the doctor's office, or going to school, and everybody's got half their face covered.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so much of our communication is we're reading faces.
So,
like it's something that we can't turn off.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing that. We're getting so much information relationally from just being able to look at each other. And now it's like, blocked off, and then we're limiting how much time we can really even be socially interacting with each other because half the businesses are shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So. And then there's the fatigue of it all. This has been going on for so long, and we all just want to get back to normal already. And like we're closer to normal than we were maybe a year ago, but it's kind of getting to be this feeling of like, is this normal now? Like, are we at the new normal?
Yeah.
So that's just one example of like a disruption that can have kind of a slow, like deleterious effect on us, like kind of slowly sapping the life out of us, and having this greater impact on society and our collective mental health. I guess that's like a big culture kind of concern and issue that we'll still be discovering the full effect of years from now. But this all the way down, like that's a worldwide example, but all the way down to just everyday stressors, a stressful job, relationships that aren't quite working out, or that are, there's too much discord or drama in the relationships that can have a big impact on people's mental health. Just self-esteem and how we are able to be effective socially or not can have an impact on those things. I guess there's really
a lot,
limitless things we could talk about that have an impact.
So what do we do? How do we, let's say we're experiencing, is it best to talk about like mild cases of depression and anxiety, or let's say we're experiencing some mild depression, like we just don't have that drive, we're kind of down about life, too many things haven't worked out the last couple of years, or maybe it goes the other way and it's anxiety. Maybe we're experiencing occasional panic attacks, or just not able to get negative thoughts out of our heads that are bothering us. What do we do?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you named depression and anxiety. One of the things that I love that we're doing here now, and that you have decided was a priority for you to do, and being a leader, is just talk about it. So being able to say, hey, depression is something that we want to help. Anxiety is something we want to be aware of and help. That's a great starting point. But those types of things, I think another thing to note is just that just the prevalence of those things is so great. It's something like 50% of people will experience mental illness in their lifetime. That's half of us.
What do you think, like how severe of mental illness do you think does that account for?
Yeah, I mean,
like somebody who's actually seeking out help, or I don't know.
It wouldn't account for that. I mean, it's certainly not 50% of people are getting treatment for this. That's prevalence rate, which is just to say best estimate based on our best research to date on what's sense. Happening in our. That's a statistic that is representative of the U.S. population. It's very similar worldwide, but you'll see different countries and cultures where it's somewhat variable, but.
Cool.
But it's something like that, and that's way more than I think we would just naturally assume. We would think, oh, maybe it's like 1 in 50 or something like that. But it's not. It's much more than that. And depression and anxiety are two of the most common disorders that will be diagnosed and will be treated or will be experienced by folks. And so just drawing attention to that, it's far more common than.
I'm a little
than
surprised
people
50% of people don't experience it. Like, who
Yeah.
are these people? Why are they not depressed and anxious? What's wrong
Shouldn't
with
we all
them?
be okay? Come on, the world's a
Freaks.
terrible place. Yeah, no, and it may be it may be more. I mean, it just
Who
depends
knows,
on what the
yeah.
criteria is.
Yeah,
Like
of
if we're
course.
looking for criteria to be like a diagnosable mental
Yeah.
illness, I think that's what this statistic.
But it's very
represents.
prevalent, is the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to your question, because this really, gets at the question you were asking anyway, which is severity. Like, what's the severity of different, maybe conditions or even within a condition? I would say it's very good to think about many of these things on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always how we diagnose mental illness. Usually, we'll think more in terms of criteria of symptoms.
Yeah.
And is it having an impact on
Yeah. Is it
how you're
disrupting
functioning,
your life? Yeah.
in different areas? Are you able to keep social obligations and function
Yeah.
pretty well there and work? And are you sleeping okay? And,
Mm-hmm.
different things of functional capacity. And then also just level of distress. If something's really distressing,
Mm-hmm.
and we see these like certain symptom constellation, that would meet criteria for a diagnosis. So to diagnose certain conditions, it's kind of like a specific pattern of symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, with depression, okay, we all know what it feels like to be sad, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if we diagnosed everybody who feels sad some days,
Mm-hmm.
we'd be over representing depression where it's
Mm-hmm.
not, that shouldn't, like, as a clinician, I wouldn't qualify that as depression.
Yeah, you should be sad sometimes.
And it's the most right. That's just to be expected. Like
Mm-hmm.
nobody's mood is just a flat, steady state all the time. It changes. It's
Yeah.
variable, and that's based on a lot of factors. How are
Mhm.
things going lately? What's happening? But depression's kind of being really sad, right?
Gonna be a problem. That can't sound good at all. Let's just leave it there.
Yep, perfect. Let's close this little thing down so it doesn't happen again. All right. We're back, everyone. Yeah, so, but, I mean, depression is really describing something that persists
Sure.
over time. It wouldn't just be, I felt sad today, or I felt sad one day last week.
Yeah.
It would be a pattern of persisting low mood, oftentimes low motivation,
Yeah.
not enjoying things. Like I used to love to do this, and now I just don't even care. I'm not, watching my favorite show on Netflix anymore. I just, it's flavorless to me.
Yeah.
Disruptions in sleep, or not being able to concentrate, having suicidal thoughts.
Mhm.
These are all, symptoms of depression, and it covers, I guess, a lot more kind of specific things than just feeling sad.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even predominantly
Feeling
sad.
Right. Yeah.
Like, especially in guys.
Yes.
There is a tendency for depression to show up as more of like a low grade irritability.
Yeah.
That's
It's just like every guy I know.
right. Everybody's just kind of annoyed all the
Definitely
time.
me.
Yeah. Mhm. So there's like specific characteristics of different things that would say this is more in the category of depression. But guess what? Anxiety has some overlap with
They're like cousins,
depression.
right?
They're like
kinda-
right,
yeah.
exactly. Or I'll sometimes say they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. I liked cousins better than two sides.
Yeah,
If you feel free to take that in your
I'll start
practice.
using that. I'm
Yeah.
gonna get rid of my coin and I'm gonna go with the cousins thing. Yeah, I like that. I think everyone will agree.
Two sides of the same coin is like they have too much in common. Cousins
Okay.
can be different.
Yeah, some similarities, but it's very clearly this guy looks more
pray
like
about
Uncle
it.
Jim.
Just pray about what you're going to do there.
I will. Thank you. This was helpful for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are similarities. There's some overlap in symptoms. Same thing with trauma.
Yeah.
Folks who have experienced trauma, a lot of those symptoms will show up in anxiety disorders or in depression. It used to be that trauma was classed as an anxiety disorder until very recently, actually.
Yeah, dude, we've been doing Kim and I just went through foster care training because it's something we're thinking about. And they talk a lot about trauma.
Yeah.
And it really caused me to slow down and think the impact of trauma can just be, it can rear its head in so many different ways. Like it can just cause so many different issues. It's really worth trying to explore, and it's pretty involved to heal people from trauma. It's certainly possible and doable, but there's a process there.
Absolutely.
It's a big category.
Yeah.
Really big category.
Yeah. And it's something that man, that's great to hear that that you guys are doing some education and learning about these things and just looking into those things. But that, I think, is really what I hope we're doing here and is happening more and more in churches, which is just talking about it, getting more awareness, getting more knowledge, educating our people, so that we can be more compassionate to each other.
Yeah.
This is the whole idea in oh gosh, now it's been a while since I was really studying the scripture to have to put together a sermon or something, but it's in 2 Corinthians.
You haven't read your Bible for a while?
I read the Bible, but I'm not as quick with some of my references like I once was.
Sure.
But I know it's 2 Corinthians. It might be chapter 1, where it's basically just saying that.
I'll look it up.
Okay, we can pull up the reference. I prefer King James version if you don't mind.
Amen, brother.
But it's basically just representing, like, God is compassionate to us in our time of need or in our troubles, so that we can be compassionate one to another.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, what an clear picture of how God's love and compassion for us when we're struggling is representative of how we should treat each other, of course. But that's just what I really want to see that to be a real lived experience for folks in the church, and not just something that we know to say, but are we really reacting and responding to that in real life, in our churches? Because I'll tell you one thing, when somebody is struggling, you think about some of the symptoms I just rattled off in depression. Does that sound like a fun way to experience the day?
Nah.
No. And especially, if of course irritability is a part of that picture. And am I fun to be around when I'm extra irritable? Not so much,
You're not even fun to be around when you're not irritable.
When I'm at my best, when I'm at my absolute best, I'm like, tolerable at best,
So, and you bring this stuff up in the church, and, well-intentioned or not, a lot of times the response you get, like, trust God more, pray about it, have faith, like all of those things, which certainly have a place in dealing with these things, but probably aren't like the root cause is probably not a lack of prayer or lack of faith. There are biochemical things happening to us. There's trauma. There's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing. And I would say, just, some of the things you described there, I would say it's not bad as a first step. At least that's better than pointing the finger and saying you've got a sin problem. You just need to go, stop being rebellious or something, which is what, unfortunately, a lot of people have been hit with in the church over the years. Your sickness is not a sin. Okay, we would know this in any other realm. If you all of a sudden were being treated for a broken arm, I mean, unless you I
like,
don't
were
know.
you gossiping about somebody?
Right. I mean, depending on how you broke your arm, it might
If you
be,
were
there might
mugging
be,
an old lady and you fell and broke your arm or something, it's a result of sin, right?
Okay, right? But if you slipped on the ice, it's April now and we still get ice a couple days here and there,
Praise God.
and broke your arm, nobody would look at you and say, "Where's your faith?
Yeah.
Why are you allowing your arm to stay broken? Do something about it.
Yeah.
Trust God."
Yeah.
Like, that would be a strange reaction that we wouldn't expect, But that's the exact reaction that we get with mental illness half the time in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you pointed out, biochemically, real things are happening. Like, our MRIs and our CT scans are not lying to us. Like, we know, if I were to concoct a way to just sap all the serotonin out of your brain right now, guess what? You're not going to be feeling chipper. Like, you're going to feel depressed. Dude, if your thyroid slows down and stops functioning at capacity, you're going to feel depressed.
Yeah.
There is it's not one of the commandments to say, thou shalt not let your thyroid slow down. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing we can do about that. And that seems so obvious to us. But that's not how we think about mental illness, and I think that's a real problem, and it's something that we need to update our understanding so that we can be relevant and effective.
It was really important for me to learn in my kind of dealing with mental health and stuff that to disconnect that a little bit, not to completely disconnect it, because we are spiritual and there's blah blah blah, blah whatever.
Yeah. Well, not quite blah,
to
blah, blah,
know,
blah.
Blah, blah, blah is good. No, it's good. But like, okay, without, like, I don't think we should psychoanalyze every person in the Bible. But there are probably some pretty decent case studies. Like Elijah seemed to have a pretty depressive episode where God had to actually, like, wake him up and force him to eat, And then there have been just really, really great Christian leaders throughout church history who have struggled with depression, like Spurgeon, John Bunyan. Like, one of the most painful books to read, and yet one of the most helpful books to read, was John Bunyan's Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners, or something like that, where he just painfully describes his experience with anxiety and probably, like, obsessive compulsive disorder, and, like, this dude was a wreck. He was a wreck. John Bunyan wrote Pilgrim's Progress, like the number 2 best-selling book ever, next to the Bible, and who's helped just millions of Christians understand their faith. Dude struggled with some pretty serious mental health issues.
And at an inconvenient time where there really is hardly any field of psychiatry at the time. It's only in its complete infancy, and the only thing on offer is Freudian psychoanalysis, where they're basically just gonna, anyway.
It's helpful to know that, though, that Christians are just as susceptible to these things as anybody, and we should expect this is going to be part of our experience. At least somewhere around 50% of us are going to experience troubling mental health issues.
And I apologize, all my statistics are the same, but another thing to note is that...
Is it going to be 50%?
It's 50%.
Oh my
gosh. You mentioned...
You get paid for this? Are you paid
somebody
for this?
Look this up.
You paid for somebody to tell you, teach you this?
Google this on your tall screen over there. You mentioned first noticing this as a kid. And that is correct. Like, the 50% of adults that will experience mental illness, it would have started developing symptoms by age 14. And it becomes 75% by the age of 24. Okay, we'll have to double check that, because now there's 2 4s in there too. So it is suspect, I admit. But it's somewhere...
I wrote it off before you even said it.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
It's actually, it's pretty close.
All right.
So it is. There's such a great prevalence of it. It is happening in the church. It does happen to Christians all the time. And we have to overcome the stigma of
Mm-hmm.
talking about this at church. Doing something like this is a good step in that direction. But continuing to make it okay, make it safe to bring these things up, and to have a receptive environment within our churches when these concerns are brought to light. To have a good answer, to have a good response prepared and taught. We teach discipleship. Don't we need our folks to know how to support each other in this way?
Yeah.
I think it's vital.
Yeah.
And we've just historically done such a poor job at it.
Yeah.
But we have to start correcting that.
Yeah.
It's up to us. We have to start correcting that and create a culture shift within the church.
Yeah.
A culture, we have to build a culture that understands that sickness is not sin, that understands that we'll go right in that analogy. I believe that God can heal sickness, but it seems like he mostly chooses not to just do it miraculously, right? And we have to consider that somebody may be suffering for years and years and years, and it's not a sin issue. It really is a question of needing healing, needing to find relief from their suffering. It should just garner our compassion, our empathy, and we throw judgment at it, or we put guilt onto somebody who's already struggling.
Yeah.
Man, that cannot be.
Yeah.
We have to do better.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to sort of land the plane on too.
Yeah.
Is I just want to encourage, the reason I brought you on is just want to encourage our people, but I want to encourage them to talk about what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
And we kind of mentioned the light ones. They're not light if you're experiencing them. But we didn't get into bipolar, paranoid schizophrenia, things that
serious
multiple
mental illness.
personality.
Yeah.
Serious mental illness. And even in those cases, the answer is the same: to try to release yourself from the stigma and talk about it.
Yeah.
And hopefully, Redemption Church can be a place where that's okay to do. I certainly desire that me, as the pastor of Redemption Church, can be a safe person to talk to about that. That's what I want. I want people to be able to talk and come to me.
Perfect. And that's beautiful. That's the tone that we, I think, have a responsibility to set in our churches, because the church should be the most compassionate place on the planet. I know we're all imperfect in here, and we're works in progress, but we really should step up our game in that area. And it's a very easy thing to just apply the golden rule. If you were suffering, if you were struggling, how would you want to be treated? Wouldn't you want to be heard? Wouldn't you want somebody to seek to understand, to empathize? Of course. Of course. Let's extend that to each other. Let's extend grace and consideration, compassion, and empathy. Let's just support each other.
Yeah.
I love the work that actually Kay Warren does on mental health. This is Rick Warren's wife. Their son died by suicide.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was a tragic case of years and years of suffering with severe mental illness, and she really has launched such a incredible campaign to just really expand awareness and destigmatizing the church. So she's a huge voice in that area. I love the work that she's doing, but it's just shining a light on this so that we can respond. Let's care about each other. She'll say, how come somebody is sick in the hospital or unable to care for themselves at home, and we'll bring them meals. Man, what if we did that when we found out somebody's depressed or somebody just got diagnosed with this condition, and we rallied around each other with the same kind of care and support.
That's a good point. Yeah.
That's a simple thing that we can shift in our mindset.
Yeah. And I think it's good to be reminded too, this is not without, there's a silver lining this is not without, this isn't with this isn't outside the bounds of God's sovereign work in our lives. Mental health issues, just like anything else, can actually be used by God for good. Johnny Erickson Tada says God sometimes uses that which he hates to accomplish what he loves. And sometimes we just need to be reminded that this isn't like the ultimate, things couldn't go any more wrong. God's still in control. He's still sovereign, and he still works through this. So
yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think, like, you know, you'll have to check my theology.
I'll do it right here in front of everybody. Live.
You know, but I mean, we're not put on this earth with a promise of an easy go at it.
Yeah.
You know, like,
No,
there's going to be struggle, there's going to be challenges, but
Yeah.
within that struggle, there's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
And that it absolutely applies in this case. It's like, and we need that. That's not diminishing somebody's experience or invalidating it. That's saying, like, we need to find meaning in our suffering. We need to find meaning in the challenges that we're struggling through, so that we can thrive, so that we can find our way through to the other side. Mental illness is, you know, it's kind of tricky because we don't really talk about it like something we cure, but mental illness is treatable.
Yes.
You know, and certainly we can get more and more proficient at managing our symptoms and our experiences and areas that aren't, you know, functioning at high capacity. We get, you know, all those things can improve. But we need to support each other through that process and be open to that. So I guess time-wise, we probably should start winding down.
Yeah, let's do it.
But I didn't really comment too much on, like, you had asked, like, practically, like, what can we do if we're feeling depressed or we're feeling anxious, we've experienced trauma in our past or some other you know, situation. You know, what are some practical things that we can do? And I just think, you know, we've talked about some of them in the area of community, how we can support each other, stand with each other. You know, if I was diagnosed with some, you know, whatever disease, I wouldn't look to you to treat it, but care that I have it and stand next to me and support me. View it like that, because sometimes people will hesitate to really stand with each other and try to offer that support because it feels like, I'm not qualified. I don't know what to do to fix this. And nobody's expecting you to. And that's okay, because your presence is everything in that moment. You don't have to know the right thing to say. You just have to care. You know, so that's one thing that kind of like a social level. But I think personally, as individuals, we have to take care of ourselves. That's that self-care piece. We talked very briefly about, like, having healthy boundaries in place, how hard that can be in pastoral ministry. That healthy boundaries are hard for everybody. You know, people, you know, relationships will push up against our boundaries, what we're okay with. Work will push up against our boundaries. Responsibilities in life will pull at our boundaries. We have to establish rhythms and routines in life that support our well-being. If we don't love ourselves and take care of ourselves well, what effect are we going to have in this world that's any good? We're not going to be able to take care of other people very well. We're not going to be able to pursue our gifts and callings passionately if we're drained all the time, if we're not doing well. You know, we have to take care of ourselves, prioritize self-care. You know, just carving out time in your schedule and your routines that rejuvenate you. Pastoral ministry is another great example. It's a constant pouring out. It's a constant drain of your you know, time, energy, life. You got to
fill up.
You have to. It has to be in balance, or else you're going to get to the point where you're running on fumes. You're going to run out of steam. That's just inevitable. So I'm such a big fan of, like, looking at our rhythms and routines to habitualize taking care of ourselves. Planning in routinely ways of recharging our batteries, getting plugged into relationships and, like, meeting with people or hanging out with friends or getting around family that lifts you up. You know what I mean? Like, some, you know, and some people are more introverted, and for them that might mean, you know, watching their favorite YouTube channel or something, you know. But you know, knowing yourself, knowing what works for you. And it's going to take a little bit of experimenting to find
Mm-hmm.
like that perfect balance, but just understanding that it's not a selfish thing to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most selfless thing that you can do, because you're going to be better for everyone else in your life if
Mm-hmm.
you're taking care of yourself and loving yourself well.
Right.
So that's a principle. Then just being mindful of like what's going on internally that you're telling yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What's the story you're telling yourself? Because we can really be our own worst critic. We can really be so critical of ourselves, so hard on ourselves, so it can be demoralizing.
Yeah.
We have to get inside our own heads and take a look at what we're telling ourselves. There's a reason why, the scripture says whatever things are good, whatever things are loving and pure, put your mind on those things.
Yeah.
We have to, again, look at all this scripture I'm throwing out here.
Yeah.
We have to, like Paul says in 2 Corinthians, we have to take every thought captive for Christ. Well, we think about that in the context of like debating each other. We need to win the debate if somebody doesn't believe in God or doesn't, see the Bible the way that I do. Okay. Well, what about yourself? Like, are you taking your own thoughts captive for Christ, which is to say, are you being, are you being healthy with your thinking? Are you being realistic? Are you being fair to yourself?
Yeah, and it starts with just acknowledging that we have some control over that. We sort of just tend to let our thoughts happen to us.
Yes.
When we have actually a responsibility
Yeah.
to not do that, but to guide and to take some control over what we're thinking, take them captive.
Yeah. So it's a responsibility. I couldn't agree more. But naturally, we almost never do it.
Mm-hmm.
We just go, I don't know about you, but like most of us, we just go about our day and we react to whatever happens.
Yeah.
Like we react to things. Somebody comes in here and interrupts this podcast, gives us a dirty look, we're both going to react to that.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go on without really checking it and seeing like, wait, what am I telling myself? Did I just make an assumption that, that person is mad at me because they gave me a certain look?
Yeah.
Well, I can't read their mind.
Right.
I'm now carrying away from that interaction an offense where there may have been nothing offensive to take away from them.
Right.
They might have just been surprised, like, whoops, walked in the wrong office. So there's so many examples we could give, but just tuning into noticing your own thought process sometimes. And probably a good way to do this, to check in on this, is anytime you're feeling like, I know this is like a huge umbrella, but anytime you're feeling not at peace, that's a great time to pause and just get a sense, like, what am I telling myself right now? What am I telling myself? That's a thought to be challenged. Anytime you're feeling not at peace, there's a thought in there that can be challenged. And go ahead, like, don't let yourself get away with negative thinking all the time. Push back a little bit. Challenge those assumptions. Consider alternative ways of seeing the situation that might give you freedom from holding onto an offense or belittling yourself.
Yeah, that's helpful, man. Well, let's try to wrap it up. I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I appreciate how God has wired you and you sharing that with our church.
Thank you.
So it's always good to hang out and talk.
It's an invaluable opportunity. It's such a big topic. It's so important. I love to talk about it. I don't usually get this kind of chance to talk about it. So I'm grateful for you. I know there's so much ground that we just wouldn't be able to cover in 5 hours, let alone however long this was.
Yep.
So
cool. Thanks, bro. Appreciate
all right.
it, man.
Thank you so much.